I do believe we're all here except for him. Not yet? Okay. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda? We need approval of the October 5th meeting minutes, workshop minutes.
Move to approve the minutes. I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And one abstain, because I wasn't there.
Okay. Okay, our agenda item is a continued discussion of the revised code amendments to prevent serial minor subdivisions. But first, I'd like to ask if there are any questions or comments that you've, after having thought over what we did a month ago, does anyone have any comments, questions from our previous discussion?
I guess the only question I have is not really about the discussion we had last time, the actual nuts and bolts of that, but it's more about when we started, Ben, I think you indicated there were, two things that changed back whenever it changed, and this was one of them, and the other was some of the road standards and stuff like that that affected it, which we were trying to get to with the minor subdivision changes. So my only real question is that tabled, that the planning commission is only going to focus on this piece of the puzzle, or are, after this is addressed or simultaneously while this is addressed, you'd also be talking about changes to the minor subdivision that we originally started with a while ago?
Yeah, I think that, if this is something that the commission is interested in pursuing, then I don't believe the changes that we had talked about in the past regarding the minor subdivision would be applicable anymore. And so this would kind of just go in place of our past discussions.
So this would stop current land that has been divided, let's say the 20-acre parcels, that would stop future back-to-backs? Or, I know that this is addressing is splits into 20s.
For this day going forward, I think what part of the answer to your question's on the screen.
Okay, I'll wait. But the answer is that this would be the change that would encompass both concerns.
Right.
Okay,
And it may not. You're going to see in a moment
okay.
a map that shows that a fourth of the county is already eligible for minor subdivisions in a way that the new change wouldn't affect. Because we might as well just go there. If you look on the screen.
Yeah, please do, I'm sorry, David.
If you look on the screen, the dark blue are large lots that are eligible for 20-acre splits. That's most of the, well, probably, a third or a fourth of the county? And then the tan are parcels of, I think they're roughly 20 acres that are already split. And so.
Already split into 20?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Or thereabouts. I mean, those are what we felt
They're pretty
met
close.
the qualification of a free split or of a large lot division. And so this is what staff was able to display. So
the new solution wouldn't fix everything in tan.
So what, the yellow or whatever color?
Yeah, let's call it tan for.
What is that?
They're 19 to 20-ish acres that have already been split.
Okay.
And they could be divided right now through the minor subdivision process. And so the concept that staff's come up with wouldn't apply to any of that area.
That was my question. The question would be, is, and I can't tell from here, but there appears to be some of those tan that are more than, they're back to back.
It's because they're right next to each other, and it is the very issue of the cereal.
Right, so for those under this proposal, those could continue to have a large, in essence,
We
a
could still
major
have cereals on those.
Okay, and there's no desire or need to try to address that?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to clarify that this is where we are right now.
No, I understand, I appreciate that, David, I was just trying to get the whole loaf instead of half the loaf.
Right.
And this side, that's really, this thing solves a potential problem that would continue on for years and years and years by those large parcels could be divided into 20. This proposal,
It fixes arguably everything in the blue.
yeah, everything in the blue would be
It's
taken
pretty
care of.
substantial.
This,
Yeah.
got it, thank you.
But it leaves open everything in tan.
Right, and that's still a lot.
problematic.
Yeah,
So is there any way to address those? Or, because they exist?
we've been trying for 3
I know.
years.
Well, you can't make them go through the process of, if we had a process for doing large lot divisions, you couldn't make them go through the process because it's already done.
Right.
What would have to be done is changing development standards, requirements going forward from there.
Right, and that's what we were trying to do, right? That was the original
And
plan.
that's what I meant by, that we can't make it retroactive. But what we can do is change the regulations going forward from there. And, any parcel that is not already vested in a land use, development application would be subject to those new regulations.
So my understanding is the TAN are around 20 acres, and they, if we do the minor subdivision change to 2 lots, they would be impacted?
Yes.
So that and
that
the
would
blue.
impact all of those parcels. It's the only thing that would only impact the blue ones would be if we added a process to do large lot divisions, which we don't now. So
The way I looked at this, and I heard you last time, and I think I agreed, because I think it was we were trying to go and attack this so the problem would be mitigated in the future. Because there's so much opportunities in that blue area to divide into splits, and we no longer limit how many you can do. This is going to address that issue and put some abilities to protect the infrastructure and make sure things were done according to the plan. So you were trying to stop the bleeding, so to speak. And I just was confirming, and I'm happy to hear that, we still want to try to address the other problem, but they are two and distinct from each other. Because one is, whatever we do with this first thing isn't going to affect the ones that are already split
Right.
less than 20.
Right.
And what we did with the less than 20s wouldn't impact the large splits if we didn't change this. So, yeah, they're separate. They're separate. Okay. Enough confusion.
Okay, just to make sure I'm not confused. So if we change the minors to 2 lots instead of 4, it would impact the brown, but you're saying it won't impact the blue? Won't it still impact the blue?
yes.
It would impact the blue.
Okay,
But Ben's proposal also impacts the blue in a way that's
Right.
probably more useful.
Right.
okay. But then we'll have the brown issue. Right,
Well, we're talking
Unless we
about
come
doing
up with
both.
another solution.
for that.
for that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think the easy way to think of it is we're part way to where we need to go. Pretty significantly so, but there's still this tan area that we need to decide what we're going to do with.
Okay. So I guess we proceed on to road infrastructure.
I didn't hear you.
Proceed on to road
Oh.
infrastructure. Unless you guys have,
Yeah, I can certainly do that. I don't know if there is, I think last time we met, the vote was presented as to whether or not they wanted to go with one of these two options, option one or option two. And I don't think anybody at that time was comfortable voting and directing staff on how they would like to proceed.
See, in my
Because-
notes, it says they chose option 2.
Yeah,
I don't remember there being a vote.
Yeah.
I think they were leaning, I could be wrong, but I remember them,
we
leaning
were leaning
towards
toward two.
that, but not an official vote and direction. So again, I could be wrong.
Yeah, because that's different from how I remembered it. I could
Okay.
be wrong too.
Well, we
yeah,
can certainly
the
do
other
it
thing is
again.
that what
We can
happened
always
is
check
because we
minutes.
never actually got through the whole package. What ended up happening was, we talked about the first part of the package, and the majority of the commissioners believed option 2 was the right approach, because I think that protected, I mean, either way, option 2 would solve the problem. Option 1 was not as good. But then we were gonna talk about the roads themselves, which we never really got into, so it's more of a road discussion about what that actually means.
Sure.
And I think that's at least for me personally, roads is always very confusing.
Okay, I mean, yeah, if we're good on that, we can certainly proceed with,
I don't know what the other commissioner
Working.
remembered, but
Yeah,
that's,
the minutes say, after considerable discussion, planning commissioners mostly favored option 2.
yeah,
Limiting further minor subdivision.
That's what I recall.
Yeah.
I don't know if we voted. I don't know that we,
Like a straw poll.
right.
yeah, I mean, there was no reason to
Do
actually
you want a
vote.
vote on it?
The minutes don't reflect it.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah, minutes don't
right.
reflect that that a vote was actually taken.
but was a vote even needed?
Yeah,
No.
it's a vote needed.
Yeah, because it's
Not
based,
necessarily.
it's just providing direction. We're not going to public hearing yet
Right.
with that, so
Or
we
you-
have plenty
or
of
even
time.
a workshop with the
Yeah,
officials, right?
yeah. So what we were trying to do is, if we used option 2, my recollection, which was a while ago, option 2 was then to say, what does it mean for roads? And how does it solve? Because again, the problem we were trying to address was infrastructure, back to back. But infrastructure was a big part of the equation, which is supported by the comprehensive plan to ensure that subdivisions support the, pay a proportionate share of the
Right.
cost of infrastructure. So I think that's where we left it, was the, what does it mean?
okay, very good, yeah, sorry for that confusion. So yeah, if we move on to road infrastructure, staff has kind of identified a couple of areas where we think there is room for discussion and improvement. And so I've outlined 4 of these problems, and you should have them either in front of you or on screen. Yeah. Mhm.
Thanks.
So with problem number 1, and I do appreciate Chief Gerald Archer, who's with us with Kootenai Fire and Rescue, as some of these do kind of weave in and out of our jurisdictions. We've had the opportunity to be engaged with the fire districts, of course, through the subdivision processes, also with building permits. And as we have been reviewing our plats and applications, there have been some concerns that have been brought up by the fire districts. One of the concerns that has come up, or one of the problems that we've been seeing, is that the fire districts, and certainly Gerald, if you'd like to chime in, give you the freedom to do so. But I think there are some fire districts within the community that don't feel like they have the adequate tools or education to make sure an existing private road complies with the International Fire Code. How it was constructed, the road base, looking at different turning radiuses, grade requirements, looking at the plan sets that show the specs on these roads can be challenging, and some of the fire district personnel don't feel like they're equipped to make a call on that. And so what has been expressed to us is that if there's anything that maybe staff could look at in facilitating the review for the fire districts. And so as an idea, at least, is that if a road is required to meet International Fire Code, when it comes to the subdivision review process, that an idea could be we put it on the applicant to demonstrate to staff and to the fire districts that it does comply with the International Fire Code. And so that would be an analysis done by an engineer or a qualified professional, we can talk about that, to demonstrate compliance for that infrastructure. So that's kind of an introduction and so a little stage setting, if you will.
Do you need an expert, or can the fire district determine, you have the capacity to determine whether it qualifies?
So many of the fire districts don't have the staffing. There are several volunteer fire districts that don't have staff assigned to that position or staff that have the training. Kootenai Fire and Northern Lakes are both fortunate in that Tyler Drexel, my counterpart at Northern Lakes, and myself have been in this position for 15 plus years and with over 30 years of experience in the fire service. So we're pretty good about working through the problems and figuring it out and looking at submittals. Not all submittals are engineered drawings. Some are less than that. So the farther you drift away from an engineered drawing, the farther you drift away from a knowledge base like myself or Tyler has, the harder it is for the volunteer agencies to make that determination on does this meet fire code or does this not. We really see it, although it's an entire chapter, we really see it as a performance code. Because at the end of the day, the fire truck has to get to the structure. So, and Tyler and I again, I apologize. Tyler and I, again, with our experience, we have a pretty good feel for that. But again, the volunteer departments, the smaller departments, the Hauser, Spirit Lake, Timber Lake, Worley, Micah, East Side, they don't have that staffing or that knowledge base. So we try to help them out where we can, but I think if the county can add another layer or assist with that as well, if nothing else, require the submittals to be fully engineered drawings to provide all the information where it's easier to make that determination would be beneficial.
Yeah, my question was probably driven a little bit by cost. I mean, I agree, we need to have safe roads, but you're talking about a professional who would do the analysis. Would that cost be borne by the applicant, or are you contemplating someone?
Presumably.
Yeah, that's what I'm,
That's another good sidebar. The last time my staff and the fire districts got together, one of the things that was shocking to me is we don't collect enough money, the fire districts don't, for there to be real time for boots on the ground to visit the site and determine if it meets code or not.
Yeah, wasn't it, didn't you say it was like $47 or something like that?
Something minuscule.
Yeah, it's $42
It's
and
even
an
worse.
average development. I encourage the developer to have a site visit with us so that we can walk and talk it before drawings are even submitted. I'm even working with realtors so that we can get there, because we can really save the applicant money, real money at the long term by, here's where the site could be instead of here, and it's gonna save you a lot more money to put it here than blasting all this rock to put it here. Then I encourage the developer, while the excavation contractor is on site, to have me out so that the excavation contractor doesn't leave the site. Then I come to do my inspection and it doesn't meet the requirements. Then they have to remobilize and pay that fee again for the excavation contractor to come out. And then I do a final. So that's 3 inspections, and that's not counting the plan review time sitting at my desk and reviewing the documentation. So the math doesn't work out for the $42 a driveway that we collect.
So if they did, if we added this engineered drawing requirement for the submittal, how much, any idea how much that costs?
Yeah, we have an engineer right there.
Just,
So we're talking about specifically verifying compliance, so thank you.
And you might introduce yourself, Eric.
Yeah, hi, Eric Olson, Olson Engineering. Myself and a group of other land development professionals have been following this and trying to stay involved. Yeah, so you're specifically asking what an approximate cost would be to review an existing private road to see if it conforms with fire district standards. And the answer is it depends, because there's, yeah.
because you're talking about existing versus non-existing, you know, right?
Yeah, talking about, existing, right? If it's proposed, that's easy, we're gonna design it, but before I give a range, I'd wanna say, it depends what we're reviewing it for, because there's horizontal alignment criteria. That's pretty easy, right? You can mostly do that with simple
The
measures.
horizontal, vertical, and clearance.
Yeah, what about the support, though, the ability of the road section to support
We
fire
gave a
apparatus?
general idea, but the weirdness of that is the fire code leaves it up to the chief.
Don't worry, we just want a range,
Yeah.
and if you're wrong, we're gonna hold you to it, we're gonna blame you.
We're just trying to get an idea.
Yeah, I'd say on the low end, if we're not having to evaluate the structure of the road itself, $500 as part of a subdivision effort. On the high end, if we are having to look at the structure of the road and potentially also bring in a geotechnical engineer for that, then maybe you're talking 4,000 or 5,000,
And this results in a document you sign, certify with your stamp, the whole deal.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Gerald?
Thanks, Eric.
Is that what you see too? Is that the price ranges that maybe people have said to you about?
I don't see the price ranges,
Okay, you don't.
no.
What's the driving factor in the price ranges? Is it the number of roads, the contours of the land? I mean, what are the driving forces that?
So I'd say it's the length, right? It's how much road are we evaluating? And then really, it's not difficult, because the things we're looking at are road width. Well, that's pretty easy. That's just a tape measure, right? Turnaround location. Again, there's standards for different turnarounds. That's pretty easy too. We've got, when you're talking grade, we've got smart levels that we can set on the steepest part of the road, and that can be done pretty easy too. The only thing I could see driving up the cost is if we actually had to physically dig into the road and evaluate the structure of the road and the subgrade, the native soils, and make a determination if that can support what's a 75,000-pound vehicle.
Unfortunately, as long as we can stay out of the wetlands, stay out of the valley bottoms and things like that, which that's all gone. That was gone a long time ago. Now everybody's building on the side of a mountain. And it's mostly all rock. We very rarely, unless we get into a spring or unless we get into some sort of groundwater issue, we very rarely have to look towards stabilization of the substrate or the ground or whatever, because it's mostly all rock all the time. We still have those weird anomalies, like I said, where we get into a spring or something like that. But the flatland's been gone for a long, long time, so now it's all mountainside.
My thought too, wouldn't the developer, whether it's a family home, just a single home, or, you know, a larger subdivision, wouldn't they want to know that they have a very stable road infrastructure, because that takes care, would help with making sure to ensure safety for their family or the people in the subdivision, able to access their homes, as well as repairs and potholes and all that lovely stuff that none of us love to deal with. You know, having a nice
Your physician's background is clouding your view.
So unfortunately, we deal with the folks that are dividing land for their family members, and they do truly care about that. They do truly care about the slope and the grade and so forth and so on. And then we deal with individuals that are just gonna turn a profit, and they could care less.
But I care less about their turning a profit, you know, it's one of those types of things too. Yeah, I
And, yeah,
understand your point.
And everything in between those two extremes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it
I
seems
care
to me
about the
it's-
safety and welfare of my community. That's why we're here.
Yeah, it seems to me, I mean, it's essential to have, you know, road, compliant roads. I mean, I've seen houses burned down where the fire truck couldn't get to them. And not only for the people that, you know, initially put the road in, but also for the people that subsequently purchase and have no clue, you know, well, they just assume it meets standards. And I was just wondering, you know, if there's ways we can mitigate the cost or and there may not be, we may need to just, you know, the applicant has to pay it. But it seems to me it's essential to have safe roads.
The other question I have for you too is, what about the highway districts? How are they involved in any of this road assessment for these areas? Because we have 4 highway districts, and so,
They are engineers.
Yeah.
And they send their staff to the sites.
Correct. One of the problems that we most run into that is this isn't a major subdivision that the highway district's gonna be involved in.
Right.
So most our challenges are either minors or they're off of a roadway that may be highway district right away, but it's not highway district maintained. So Mellick Road, South State Line Road, Big Rock Road, I can go on and on and on, where these developments, the highway district really doesn't have a dog in the fight. They would sure like to have, and I would like for them to, but it's beyond their maintenance. It's beyond what they take care of.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Next one. So keeping the theme with International Fire Code, this has also come from another conversation that we've had with the fire districts. And this has come up more recently, especially in some minor subdivisions. But as Gerald mentioned, that as more and more subdivision development occurs, it is taking place in more remote areas. And there is a standard in the International Fire Code that requires a secondary means of emergency access at a threshold. And that threshold is when it serves 31 or more dwelling units. And it's important to start with that because the standard is dwelling units. However, and kind of as I've mentioned here, is that when we are in the process of doing subdivision review and then soliciting comments from the agencies, including the fire districts, it is hard to know, first off, whether or not there are 31 or more dwelling units. And so the fire districts are in a predicament of commenting on these subdivisions. And we have recently experienced a couple in which they have said, look, these particular subdivisions will increase the potential for 31 or more dwellings to be served by this existing private road. And therefore, we think, as the fire districts, we think that a secondary means of emergency access is now required. The problem is, again, that the International Fire Code states dwelling units, where it can be problematic because there may be existing parcels out there, but they are undeveloped at this point. And so technically, according to the International Fire Code, they aren't to be counted because they're not served.
Or
Or
not.
not, sorry.
But that particular parcel could have 3 units on it, because it could have the principal unit, an accessory unit, and a temporary unit for a hardship.
A question for clarification. When you say, first of all, what's a dwelling unit? What's the definition under the code?
It's a,
Bathroom, kitchen, sleeping, and what's the fourth thing?
Eating.
Eating.
And trying to visualize the problem, is it that you got 100 acres, there's 5 dwelling units on it, but then subsequently these minor subdivisions keep going in and eventually hit the 31 threshold? Is that the issue?
yeah, so what's happening is that, and I'll just kind of describe the scenario that we were faced with not too long ago. We had a private road that was serving, I think, 29 parcels. A minor subdivision came in, and I believe it was a 4-lot minor. It was therefore bumping it over the 30 threshold, and then forced the issue of providing secondary means of emergency access.
I'm sorry to interject, you may want to clarify, assuming that each one of those 29 home parcels was either A, developed with a single-family residence, or if it were vacant, it would still only have one primary residence or one dwelling unit on site. So we got to clarify that the overall potential could be a lot more than 29 with the existing conditions versus the additional residences. This is just how you count the development. So we need to clarify that because there's just really no fine line.
So thanks, Vlad. So what's happening is that if the fire district is looking at the existing built conditions and looking at the dwelling units, there could be, again, they could be approving subdivisions that exceed 30 parcels because their International Fire Code says 30 dwelling units. And so we're continuing to approve minor subdivisions or other subdivisions that increase the potential for, at some day in the future, more dwelling units to come in afterwards that exceed 30, and then force some unfortunate property owner down the line to now be stuck with, if you want a building permit for your dwelling, you are now going to be responsible for coming up with a secondary means of access.
Is that caught? I mean, if they go over the threshold, is that regularly identified? Or are there times where it's just overlooked?
It's a hard standard to administer, and I can maybe let Gerald chime in to that.
Yes,
but-
so it is difficult, and there have been pieces that, developments that slip through the cracks. What we try to do as a fire district is, it's quite simply, I bring up the county's map, and I count lots. And I bring it to the attention of the community development department when we have that potential, because the fire district never wants to be in a position where we've allowed a subdivision, but now we're gonna tell you can't build on those lots because there's already 30. So if we look at every lot having the potential for one, and Vlad, I know that number could be larger, but if we just figure on a 1-to-1, one residence per lot, we count the lots, and then when we're at 29 lots, we know it's time to throw a flag up that says, hey, we could have a potential here. Because if a developer is trying to put in a mini or a major or something like that, it's a lot easier to work with them than trying to deal with the individual that's wanting to put the single home in, the 32nd home in. Right, that's an awful lot to put on their table to say, you have to fix this. We would rather do it when the developer is creating the lots and splitting the lots up.
Would it solve your problem if the rule were modified in the county here to say 31 dwelling units, or, it's over 30, I guess, is the issue, 31 dwelling units or 31 lots? Either or. I mean,
Yeah, so
would that solve the problem?
It would, but we need to change state law to make that happen.
Well,
Because it's not a county regulation that's
Oh, it's a
doing
state.
it. It's a
Well,
state.
can't the county apply a more stringent standard? That wouldn't violate the state
It
statute.
can't override this state.
Pat?
To my understanding, and I may be wrong, but to my understanding, you can't lessen an adopted code,
Right,
but you can adopt a more stringent.
right, that much is true. yeah.
So and that would be a point of clarification, really, because right now there's a question out there of do we allow the development or do we not allow the development? Well, if you adopted the language that you just mentioned, then you're not lessening the adopted fire code, you're not lessening the building code or any other codes that exist. You're just making a point of clarification and saying this also applies to lots.
More importantly, I'd like to make Pat work. But Pat, can you do that? Could you do that? Could you make it a more stringent standard?
You could.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think it probably would need a little bit of clarification on what the more stringent standard would be. Would it be either one?
Either one,
Whether
yeah. I
it's-
mean, what I'm sensing here, I mean, it seems the permutations are you've got 35 lots and only 4 are built on. And you have only one ingress and egress. And your concern is, as these lots get developed, at some point, they're gonna go over the 30 threshold, and then you gotta step in and say, you can't do it. And now you're after the fact, everything's been put in, and it's really difficult to get that second access in, maybe because there's, lots have all been built on and so forth. And to do that up front, if you have a threshold of 30 of lots or 30, structures, whatever the living quarters, because you have 2 on 1 lot, you could end up, hitting that threshold without filling up all the lots. It seems like it would solve your problem.
Well, the issue is, of course, the number of dwelling units is more restricted than the number of lots. The number of dwelling units is more restrictive than the number of lots,
No, it isn't.
because if you have 20 lots, and some of them, let's say 20 of those are undeveloped, they say they're vacant, and somebody wants to add on 10 more lots, Gerald would come back and say, yeah, we have the potential of 10, you could add 10 additional lots, but you have to go back and say, what if each one of those 20 vacant lots exercises a primary, the primary structure being a duplex? At that point, you already reach 40 units on the property, excluding, not even counting the accessory living units. So at which point do we just say that we can't even count the number of lots? We just have to go off of the potential of number of dwelling units that could be maximized on each parcel.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, if you do either one, 31 lots or 31 dwelling units, it solves the problem. And we're only talking about having to put in a second ingress and egress, right? That's all we're talking about here.
But how do we know the potential of 31 dwelling units? Can you help me understand that?
But if you
have-
already have 31 lots,
What if you have 10 lots?
if you have 31 lots, okay, you gotta get a second ingress and egress, right? If
But you
have-
may need the second egress with just 10 lots.
If you have 10 lots, you don't need to.
Yes, you do.
But then if you put in duplexes and you have whatever over the 30 living units under, if you had an either or rule, you'd have to have a second ingress and egress. That's all I'm saying.
I think
Right.
the challenge may be is that if we're going to be approving a subdivision that is still within that threshold of either one, 31 dwelling, or 30 dwelling units or 30 lots, and say it meets that requirement, and therefore they don't need to have a secondary means of access. And this is just kind of a hypothetical, right? But let's say that they're all undeveloped. And, we recently approved a 10-lot subdivision. The other 20 that were not part of the subdivision, they start building, they have their dwellings, they have maybe an accessory living unit, so they're kind of eating away at that 30 dwelling units now.
Because they're serviced by the same road, different subdivisions serviced by
Yeah,
the same road.
right.
right.
So then what we have done is we've determined that these lots within the subdivision to have reasonable utility and livability, and that we're not putting an undue burden on those property owners. Because of the properties outside of that subdivision who have been taking up in those dwelling units, you get down to the end of the road and now that subdivision decides that they want to start building. But because of the development that's already occurred, they have bona fide lots, but because there was a point when the previous people got to the threshold, and now they are stuck with, the only option for us to build our single-family home is to put in a secondary means of access.
I guess I'm not understanding, because what the problem is there, because if you said 30 lots serviced by this road, and that meets the threshold, and you've got to put in a secondary ingress and egress, it seems to me you solve the problem that they're running into, even though they're not developed yet. Because the problem you're running into, it sounds like, is as they get developed, if you go by building units, at some point you meet a threshold. And it's people on the back end who get hurt by that. They're now restricted, they can't build.
But with
And then it's harder, it seems to me at that point, because now you got all these units in, it seems to me it'd be generally harder to get a second ingress and egress.
After
put
the
in.
fact.
Certainly, I mean, but what we've done is when we've approved that subdivision, we've essentially said that this lot or this subdivision are they're bona fide lots. You are granted the available uses within the underlying zone. But now, because of that issue, they may not have that potential. So somebody, let's say you go and buy that parcel or that lot as part of the subdivision, you spend $300,000 on that lot. And then because people have been able to develop before you, have kind of stolen that development right from you,
Right.
and now you are responsible, not after paying that $300,000 for that lot, to individually, no one else has to do this, but you do. You have to go in
Or
and
you
build.
can't get your house.
You have to go build that secondary means of access,
I
or
get
you
it.
don't get your house.
I get the issue, but I'm trying to solve the issue, and it may not solve the entire problem, but
Can
if
I-
you say 30 or more from the get-go, then the secondary access is put in, and it mitigates the problem you're talking about, it seems to me.
Can I,
Not
point of
entirely.
point
Yeah,
of
go
clarification?
ahead.
So if he's saying if two developers we're talking about, two areas being developed, but one is 10 pieces of property, and the other is maybe 10 with 30 units on it. Well, they've hit the 30, as soon as they hit a total of 30. So when they get to 20, they can't put any more on, because that locks out the other people, is what he's talking about. He's talking about if you make it where it's not just dwelling units, but lots.
We can't make a contingency, each and every property is reviewed on its merits. We cannot create a contingency stating that the development of one property is based on the restriction on another property. We can't obligate somebody to do that.
But that's
I don't know, they can't. I mean, if the rule is.
we're being more restrictive. We're not being less restrictive. We're being more restrictive in the aspect of the development.
But as Ben said, each and every parcel is afforded, and I'm just looking at the code, as far as I'm concerned, all the residential zones have an allowance of a primary residence, either a single family or a two-family dwelling, plus accessory living units. And like Ben says, each parcel of land, when we make a finding for subdivisions, it has to be clear that each parcel has reasonable utility and livability, meaning that it could be self-supportive. It could have access, it could have sanitary facilities, it could have water supply. And so when it comes to major subdivisions, clearly the code states if you have a major subdivision that has more than 25 parcels, you have to have secondary means of access. There's nothing in the code that alludes to, there's nothing in the code that even remotely states accessibility should be based on dwellings. There's nothing in our code. There's nothing in the code that talks about minor subdivisions, whether they're stacked or not stacked and being off of the same road, having to have secondary means of access. The 30 dwellings, the limit on 30 dwellings comes directly from the fire district. And what we're saying is that while the fire district solely looks at existing built environment and proposed, the existing built environment is what makes it very difficult for us to accept, because the fire district will look at 10 lots that are built, and they don't count them as the density of the built environment. They just look at, okay, there's a house here, here, and here, and here. Okay, we have 5 houses built on 20 lots. We can do 25 more dwellings. But they don't include the vacant parcels.
But that's what we're asking. Why can't we include the vacant parcels?
Yeah, and I don't even know that's more restrictive. You're really talking, aren't you, about whose ox gets gored? Because
And when.
if the initial developer has to comply with a rule that if there's 30 lots that are buildable, you gotta have a second ingress and egress, their ox gets gored. But what I'm hearing is you have these poor people who are buying their lots, and all of a sudden, another house goes in and they're over the 30 threshold, and now their ox gets gored. They have to bear the cost of putting that second egress and egress. A developer up front can spread that cost among all purchasers, and it makes it more equitable, it seems to me. If you're goring the ox of the person who comes in at the end, from what I'm understanding, they bear the entire cost. And that seems, eminently unfair
Becomes
to
a
me.
showstopper
Yeah.
and an unfair one.
Isn't that what you're getting at? It's eminently unfair for that person? You feel bad, you come in and you say you can't do it.
But the problem is, these are not isolated cases. We're talking about 30 lots or 30 parcels, whatever. But there could be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everybody's coming on this road.
Well,
Some point in time, this road is gonna have more than 31, whatever the word is.
Building units.
Units.
Right.
Okay. The problem is, it depends, it's a lottery. Where are you in the lottery? If you're in the beginning of the lottery, you don't have to have a secondary. If you're at the end of the lottery, you do. And I don't know how you solve that, because people are buying property all the different times and developing at different times.
Well, this wouldn't solve the entire problem. I mean, it
But-
would
but
solve
again- but-
potentially some of it. I'm trying to think of a way you mitigate it, because, sure, you could have, 10 lots with, fourplexes on them, and all of a sudden you're way over, okay? Or somebody all of a sudden decides to tear their house down and put a fourplex in. You have all kinds of permutations, but the more, what I'm trying to drive at is, seems to me, if I understand the issue, the more you can cause the original developers to bear the cost of the ingress and egress so they can spread it to subsequent buyers, the more equitable it is. The inequity right now is, if I have it right, is you come in and you say you can't build to that one owner who bought the $300,000 parcel.
But if they have
and they gotta pay for it.
30 lots or parcels, whatever we want to call it, they're going to be, and they're developing it at one time, that's a major subdivision.
Well, no, but the problem is you have these minor subdivisions.
I know, but that's my point.
You've got
My
the serial
point is,
minor
you don't have
subdivisions.
30, you have 4s and 6s and 8s.
So you can't equitably distribute it
Can't,
to one
yeah, if
person.
you have 30, it's a major
Then,
subdivision.
let me just give you an example, because I know of one. I look at it every day. It's a parcel that was like, 260 acres, and it was split up into all these minor subdivisions, all these little corporations, the serial problem. And they have a road going in there, and that road accesses more than 30 parcels. That's what I'm driving at. Unless I'm not understanding the issue. Because the issue isn't the subdivision, the issue is how many currently building units are accessed by the road, right? That's the issue.
That's part of the issue. Part of the other issue is that we are approving subdivisions and creating new lots that could have the potential from being denied building permits. And we cannot do that.
Right. But if you had a rule where you're creating a new subdivision that throws you over the 30 threshold of parcels, then if we did it that way, then they'd be required to put in a second ingress and egress in.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that this is a perfect solution, but what we have here is that upon subdivision review, that we have a number in place so that if they exceed that threshold, then the developer of that particular subdivision is now responsible for identifying and building an emergency access.
Right, with respect to building or the units, right? So they have to, if they're putting in, they tell you they're putting in the,
No, we would just look at the existing condition and just count parcels or lots.
oh, so you already do that.
We could create, so one of the things that we can do within the subdivision, if we are concerned about the number of dwelling that would be accessed off of a road, we could put a restriction, say, lots within this plat are subject to a single-family residence, and no two-family dwellings or no ALUs to limit the overall number of dwellings. But as Ben said, any of those existing lots that are adjacent to that subdivision that access off of the same road that have not been built out, they have the freedom to get the duplex, get the temporary hardship, as well as an ALU. And so we can't, we have no control over what's outside of the plat, but we could place restrictions. I don't think we have ever done that, Ben. I don't think we have placed restrictions on the use.
I think we have once, but.
Question of clarification, though, I'm confused now. You said if the road accesses more than 30 dwelling units, there has to be a second ingress and egress. Is that the rule?
That's what the International Fire Code requires.
That's what you follow, okay. So if you have a road that's accessing 20 dwelling units, and a developer comes in, or minor subdivisions come in, and they create lots that throw that road over, just the lots, no dwelling units, over the 30 threshold, do you currently require them to put a second ingress and egress?
No, we don't.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
That
and
if you did that, then you would, it seems to be more equitable than waiting until the last person, an individual homeowner is stuck.
Yep, and that's what we've
That's
proposed.
what this proposal is,
Yeah, that's-
except shouldn't it say dwelling units instead of parcels and lots?
No, I mean, again, I want to start by saying that this is not a perfect solution because we do not have the ability, I don't think, to count the number of dwelling units. And it, let's see, how do I
Well,
put
if
this?
that's true, then we never know if we're actually meeting fire code.
That is true, but this is a
That's pretty
step,
worrisome.
this is a step in the right direction, I believe. That at least we have a standard that says, hey, developer, you are proposing to develop a subdivision that exceeds 30 lots. It's reasonable to expect.
So we know that that's gonna
Exactly.
exceed fire code.
Right,
But we also know that it's possible to exceed fire code with 20 lots.
it's possible to do that, yeah.
It's possible.
But we don't have a standard right now. And at least I believe that this is a step in the right direction to help the fire district. Again, while it's not a perfect solution, I do believe that it is a step in the right direction to create some mechanism for a developer to say, okay, I realize that I am now 30, 31, 32, 33, that I'm going to have to identify a secondary means of access before additional lots are created.
A couple of things, if I may. The basis of the 30, just so you know, the background, it's for evacuation. So that we can control the number of people that we need to evacuate if there's a major wildland fire or something like that. So we need to try to keep that number from getting away from us. That's where it comes from in the fire code. Second thing, it goes back to the blue and beige map, blue and tan map. What's built is built. And we have a huge difficulty dealing with that. I have Silver Beach Loop Road, it's not wide enough, but we allow houses to be remodeled and built on it. And I can go on and on and on and on and on, but that's not what we're here for. I think what this does is a good start, right? If we look at, okay, anything over this point, then we limit it on the plat, or we use whatever tools are available to us to try to get there. And then slowly we start trying to figure out what to do with the existing. We're never going to, I've been trying forever, we're never going to get all of the old problems that have happened long before any of us are in the positions we're in happened, cleaned up and figured out. So we need to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, okay, what do we do from this point forward? And then the last thing is, unfortunately, requiring a secondary egress isn't that easy. We've been trying for 20 years to get a secondary egress out of the top of Armstrong Park. And we can't get property owners to work together because an emergency egress has to be an easement, a forever easement. And trying to get that established. I have the same thing with the whole south end of South State Line Road. And there's multiple people there with large parcels are locked up and they don't have the ability to divide up. Big Rock Road can't divide up for the family members that have expressed interest in dividing for their own family. They can't break up their own property. because they can't get together on an agreement for an easement. So constructing the secondary access is the easy part. And I use every tool in my toolbox, even guaranteeing that that easement can be gated where I'm the only one, the fire district is the only one that has a key. So it's, nobody's gonna use it to access hunting ground, or nobody's gonna use it to get into the backside of a gated community or whatever. We will only open the gate for emergencies. It is very, very difficult, please.
Would that have to be brought up to fire code standards, the quality of that secondary?
Correct. And that's another piece of it. So it's not just, go forward and put in a secondary egress, because a lot of times terrain or individuals, or there's so many different things that come up to that. It's very hard to accomplish.
You need an agreement because it's a private road, right? You just can't, take the property and create it. I think I'm catching up to you. I mean, you're actually, what you're doing there with that solution, it doesn't do away with the over the 30 building units, right? So it's really is either one. If you meet either one, you have to put the second
You have
road.
the same problem,
Yeah.
or you still have a problem, or potentially have a problem, yeah.
So the road doesn't have to actually be used all the time. The secondary road doesn't actually have to be used. It's just an emergency evacuation.
Correct. And because it's primarily wildfire that drives the installation of it, it's not even something that I mandate being plowed and maintained in the wintertime, because we very rarely, then if we have some unforeseen emergency, we'll get the highway, we'll get somebody in there, we'll plow it, and we'll go out that way. But I try to dangle every carrot I can to get that put in, and it's an uphill fight.
I had a question, maybe, I don't know if David or Pat could explain. If we did have an issue with having to restrict the development on a proposed plat, let's say instead of all by right use, you would be limited to one by right use, would that still meet the threshold of reasonable utility?
Say that again,
Yeah,
Glenn?
I missed you. Go ahead.
If we had a plat where we were to restrict development, let's say to single-family residences, you could not have duplexes, you could not have ALUs, temporary hardship, because that could potentially go over the threshold of 30 dwelling units on the road. If we were to restrict development within the plat, now we can't do anything obviously with unplatted parcels or those that have been platted but don't have that restriction. But if we were to restrict development to a single-family residence, to avoid having multiple dwelling units on individual lot going over the threshold, would the restriction on primary uses still meet the minimum standard of reasonable utility and livability?
Well, before I go there, it seems like the question that's being begged is, can you even do that? Because the zoning code allows you to have the right for multiple dwelling units. Can a plat override that?
Well,
I don't think it can.
we just talked about, I thought we brought it up a few minutes ago and we said that is a potential solution to
I
limiting
missed
units.
that. I'm not following that.
Ben, maybe, did I misspeak, or, because we just had this conversation, we said if we were to limit, if we had the potential, if there was a concern from the fire district that having multiple dwelling units on the proposed lots could exceed the threshold of 30, and we were to limit development within the subdivision to one single-family residence on each lot, that could be a potential solution. But would
Well,
that still,
I don't know. That seems like we're overstepping the zoning code.
If I might, I think, Vlad, you might be talking about the idea that the state has their laws and we could be more restricted than the state. That discussion was had several minutes ago, but.
Right, but this is different when you say that a plat's going to restrict more than what the zoning code allows.
Right, that's my point.
What do you
And I
think?
would say only if it was allowed, if the board was able to do that as a condition of approval, and then that made it to the plat, that would be one thing.
Or if the developer volunteered it, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
that's exactly what I was saying, is if we had a condition to put a restriction on the face of plat and the board
So if-
approved it.
Yeah, if it was a voluntary restriction, that I could see working.
But if
I
it's
don't know
a,
how we would, I don't think we could impose a limit when the zoning code allows a higher
So-
density.
Wouldn't your trade-off is you wouldn't have another road.
Yeah, right.
So it seems like there is some room for voluntary limit here
So what
because they
we,
could not have to build another road.
so an example is one, I think it's Micah Estates, where this scenario came up in that there literally was 29 lots
Mm-hmm.
that were being served by this road, and they had a 4-lot proposal. The fire district eventually said this isn't gonna meet international fire code because it's gonna exceed, or it already exceeds, or I think there's, yeah, it's 29, so
Yeah.
4 would be too many. And the applicant has revised their submittal to do a 2-lot minor so that they kept it to 30, yeah, it's 30 even. And what we did on that plat is we actually put a restriction that says that there are your available uses are single-family residential use unless, so you're limited to a single-family residence unless you are able to get a
Meet,
secondary means of
second-
access approved by the fire district. So, I mean, maybe I should be reprimanded for that, but I think, I think.
We won't do that.
Yeah, okay. I think that was, I felt reasonable that that was a good solution because with the requirements of the fire district, they should be limited. And we put a condition that note was gonna be on the face of plat. It has, to my knowledge, hasn't been recorded yet, but it is part of the order of decision. So,
And the other interesting side note to that one is there's another subdivision in the mill in this same neighborhood that we've told the people we have to deny
yeah,
because you don't have a secondary access.
same
And-
road.
And to me, the really hard part about it is they already spent $15,000 or more working up the subdivision to go through our process. So we didn't, there was no way we could tell them ahead of time because we didn't know.
And my question may or may not be pertinent, but was the applicant a developer, so to speak, or was it a
That was
family?
mom and pop, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so they weren't, to my knowledge, again, they started out as being 4 and then reduced it to 2. My understanding is that they were intending to sell it. It wasn't something that was for family purposes.
But it wasn't a developer that does regular subdivisions.
That's my point, because we keep talking about the developer that's gonna come in and do this or
In
do
this
that.
case,
We need to stick it
my
to the
memory is it
developer.
was a family that wanted to
And,
divide up the property.
it's just a
An
landowner.
individual property owner, right,
Right.
yeah.
Want to maximize their
Yep.
profits.
Yeah, that's
But-
a consideration we need to take seriously.
Yeah.
Determining how we approach it.
David, I'd like to.
Before you
point-
go there, Amy's been wanting to chime in for 10 minutes. She's on Zoom. Amy, why don't you unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I am the planner that was on Micah Estates, and I can speak to it a lot. But since this is just an idea, and it sounds like we have a pretty good grasp on the issue at hand, is the International Fire Code is, of course, based on dwelling units. We are looking at a parcel's potential for dwelling units. And I think that's the solution we would like to write into the code. One thing I'd offer, and maybe Pat can chime in on our ability to do this, we're floating around the number 31 a lot. And to tackle Vlad's concern that a parcel could potentially put on at least 2 dwellings. You could put an accessory living unit on it if you're not over the aquifer. Perhaps that's the potential we could look at. If we look at a parcel and we just count its potential of dwellings, and that's what we're counting, and then we just say developed or not developed, we're just counting the potential. Maybe in our code we write something to, that by creating this parcel or this private road is serving potentially this many dwelling units. in the future, and maybe we count our subdivisions, say, your subdivisions could potentially put you over this threshold of 31, or I don't know if you know what I'm getting at, because
Yeah, I
then
do.
we could enforce area access.
Amy,
But I also have, go ahead.
I wonder if we couldn't write into our code a requirement that we basically borrow from the fire code and say, under our code, if you hit a threshold of 30 dwelling units, regardless of parcels connected to the road, if there's a potential for 30 dwelling units, then you have to plan for the second point of access.
Ultimately, potential
Yeah.
might work.
If that was in our code,
Yeah.
then it takes the burden off of you.
How do you determine potential? Would be my word.
You look at each parcel.
By parcel and by zone.
What's each parcel?
and-
Essentially driven by the zone and what you
Yeah,
can
by
put
zone
on.
and parcel.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Some
yeah, that
allow
would
certain
solve the
things.
problem.
Yeah.
Some
So-
could be one, some could be two.
So what would that potential then be? Because if the underlying zone says you're allowed to have a two-family dwelling and an accessory living unit,
Hmm.
it's
We'd
as
have to
far as
count.
how many
Mhm.
two-family dwelling units we actually process, the percentage is very low in comparison to single-family residential use.
Right.
So if we're gonna use that threshold, and we're gonna say essentially 10 is the number, because if you exceed 10 lots, because those have the potential,
That's true.
then that's a pretty high
It's a pretty
standard.
high bar.
It's very restrictive, and I
Yeah.
grant you, probably overly restrictive in
Yeah.
some situations.
But isn't it easier to forgive? You can say they come in and they ask for
Can they get a variance?
a variance.
But typically a variance is to a physical hardship.
I mean, probably not from your standpoint, there's no variance, but from the county, could you get a variance?
Our code is the
Well,
variance process.
It wouldn't be the variance that we're typically thinking
It
of.
would create a kind of
Because
a
it's a
mess for you
physical
guys, I
hardship.
suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to do
And I just want to chime in.
See,
It still would be. I don't think we can. Maybe the issue is too complex, because I share Vlad's concern, but I don't want to be too restrictive either. I think getting a step in the right direction is where we need to start. Maybe we don't look at the potential for someone to put in a single, two-family, or a accessory living unit, but at least in a step right direction where we can start counting parcels and their potential and not the built environment. Because the fire district, if we're going to say you need to put in a secondary access, someone could easily say this road only serves 7 at this time. You, the county, don't have the authority to enforce this. And that's the issue.
see,
Because we do have fires, so. But I also want to put the burden on an individual owner. That'd be rough to say you alone are responsible for putting in this secondary access because you're lucky number 32 or 31. Yeah.
okay, John said it better than I did when I tried to say it, but how many is it? We're talking about numbers again of 30, 31, whatever the number is. But how many if these are small developers, how many are small developers and how many are large developers? A small developer is 4 or less. Because if a lot of these are small families or whoever, you'll never know what the potential of that area is over time. I mean, that's what I was trying to get at, is that map with all the tan or whatever, beige, whatever the color is, you don't know when that's going to be developed. So you can grant 4, right? A subdivision. And then a year later, another 4.
A year later, there's
Another
4
4.
more lots created
Right, it's not
next
that they
to it. It
come with
changes-
30 or 20
It
acres.
changes the calculus.
It changes the calculus. The problem is, it's the incremental growth that goes on because people are able to go and have back-to-backs. But that's always been that way. But that's why I'm wondering if this solution is even doable if you have a lot of people that are small developers.
But isn't what they're suggesting here solving at least some of the problem that it's either dwelling units or lots, as I understand, that's where you're going, is it's either dwelling units or lots.
Yeah.
And you meet the 30 threshold, boom, you gotta have a second.
But what happens
second
if you have
act-
6 people, 6 individual developers over 10 years? Okay? And they're on the same road.
Yeah,
But they
but-
don't develop at the same time, and they may not even been, might not have been a minor or a subdivision. It may be 20 acres here, 20 acres here, 20 acres here.
I understand, but the problem they're addressing is currently, if I understand right, when you hit the 31 number, that individual gets stuck with the bill.
But that's my point.
Yeah, that's currently with counting dwelling units. You help to mitigate that. You don't do away with that potential problem, but you have to mitigate it, seems to me, if you go by the number of lots. Because if you have another development that goes in and adds 10 lots, boom, they're over the threshold.
So you look
And
at
that
the
developer
road,
has
you
to-
look at the road that's at, so you start, the point is, right today, you go to the IFC standard, there may not even be a road there yet, right? Okay, so you have all these parcels with no road, owned by different people. How do you do that? How do you go and decide it's 30? Now, potentially, it could be more than 30.
So if I may take a swing at that. Every subdivision, and this is why I hung my hat on lots and not structures, because lots are much easier to manage. So every subdivision, I literally bring up the county map and count the number of lots on the road. And see where we're at. And even if they're just asking to create a second lot, I still count. And then if it's 32, then they get told no. Because I don't want to be that person that approves a lot and then tells them they can't build a structure. I think this is a starting point to at least mitigate the problem or keep it from getting worse. Can the 30 go to 90? Yeah, and that's kind of outside my control. We have a situation where we already exceeded the 30, and I'm driving down the road and it's like, well, where did that manufactured home come in? Because it was a hardship, and it didn't even run through my approval process because it was a hardship. So now we exceeded that. But I think, and it's my code, and I'm charged with enforcing it, and I understand the liability that I'm bringing upon the district and our members, but this is a start. And if we can't control the 90 structures, at least we can control the 30 lots. So, and then we go from there.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Maybe what I'm not doing a good job of articulating is, what happens if all this property, all that tan area is on private roads? There is no fire district road. I mean, there's no road yet, because they haven't developed it yet. So when you count stuff, what road are you looking at? Is every road you're looking at already meeting the standard of?
No, so if we got into that scenario, if we're talking about a 100-acre parcel or 400-acre
Yeah.
parcel, and somebody's gonna drive a new road into it and create a bunch of 20s,
Yeah.
then we would evaluate that at that time. And if it's a brand-new road, if it's branched off of a road that loops, then we start counting from zero at
Okay.
that brand-new road. If it's already a one-lane road up a canyon, then we go all the way back to the start of the draw, and when they try to develop or split that 400 acres into 20s or whatever, then they get told, as soon as they hit that 30 number, and there may be 28 already up the draw, then they get told they have to have a secondary.
Okay.
One thing that maybe I'll add too is, it's hard to reconcile the dwelling units and the number of lots. And Vlad mentioned this earlier, in that the major subdivision process, it currently requires the standard to be implemented if you are exceeding 25 lots. And so the code contemplates that 25 lots is a number in which we are going to require a secondary means of access. Now, an option could be is that if we feel like 25 is a number in which it is reasonable because it still allows for some flexibility in granting accessory living units, two-family dwelling units, then that is certainly something that we could also look at. Because again, I suppose that's where 25 came from, is that there should be a point in which secondary means of access comes in. We don't know what those property owners are gonna use that property for. So perhaps we just kind of find some not middle ground, so to speak, but some compromise between the two and say, well, why not 25 to be consistent with the major subdivision process? So maybe that's something to consider as well.
That's by lots.
That's
Yeah.
solely by lots,
Right.
yes.
Gerald, how would that impact you if we actually lowered it down to 25?
I would support it 100%. I'm still governed by my code. One of the things that you see in the larger subdivisions is smaller lot size. You start getting down to lots that really won't support, maybe an ALU over a shop or something like that, but really won't support a secondary freestanding structure, residence, and then a hardship
Temporary
resident.
hardship,
It just
yeah.
simply won't do it because now your lot size starts getting so small,
Can't fit everything.
right? Because now you're talking about quarter acre and things like that. So it kind of polices itself on that point. But yeah, if you wanted to go to 25, I'd support that all day long.
I'm not sure how that makes any difference. That just means the 26th lot is the one that has to bear the cost as opposed to the 31st, right? That's all we've done. That's all that would do.
That's all it would do.
And
But
we'd be putting it in the land use code instead of relying on the fire code.
And the smaller that number gets, like Vlad, you mentioned 10, because everything has a potential for possibly 3, right? So if you do the math, the smaller we reduce that number, the more existing roads that we affect. 10 scares me because that could be a majority of the county outside of development, or outside of cities, right?
Right.
So we have to watch the ramifications of what we do.
Right.
I think what the 25 does is that it is a number that still, again, allows for people to build accessory living units, have multifamily dwelling units that may exceed 26 dwelling units, but that would still comply with the International Fire Code. So they wouldn't, even if it was a number in code that says 25 lots is the number, a property owner could still, if it's fully built out with single-family residential use, could still build an accessory living unit, and it would then still comply with International Fire Code because it doesn't exceed 30 dwelling units on that road. So I think that would be the difference.
I need to go.
See you.
Hey, Pat, forgot a question. Regarding the minor subdivision, we had a discussion about possibly drafting language that would deter the serial minor subdivisions.
Uh-huh.
And did you have a chance to do that, or are you giving that some thought?
I haven't yet.
Okay. Yeah, just want to make sure it's still
We
there.
have other issues.
So I want to make them work.
He's working.
Been putting out fires, but not the kind of fires that Gerald's.
We have some zoning and building code matters we're going to court on. And we have a $38 million structure that's underfunded, and.
It seems to me that we need to solve this, because if you're reading the newspaper, Connect Kootenai is going to start encouraging people to do auxiliary units, housing units. So we've got to have some understanding going forward that You know, there may be roads that need to be built if you're gonna do this. Because they're even talking about providing sample plans for people to build it.
They're doing what they can to create true affordability.
Right, and so it's not like we can put this off and,
Agreed.
Is it okay if I make a motion on this? Can I make a motion? You can not second it or
We'll see if it gets a
whatever.
second.
Okay, so I like the solution, require applicant to provide secondary emergency access if existing road service serves or has the potential to serve. I'd like to move that down to 25 lots / parcels or more. So currently, we have it based on dwelling units, correct? Currently?
Under the
It's
fire
an
code.
international fire code standard.
It's on
We,
dwelling units.
we don't have a standard in the
Okay.
county code.
Still applies, right?
Yes, it still would,
It does.
still would apply. But
But here
I
you'd
make
have
a-
a case where the more restrictive would apply from the land use code.
yes,
Right.
yes. And so my motion is require applicant to provide secondary emergency access if existing roads serves or has the potential to serve 25 lots / parcels or more. That's my motion.
I second the motion.
You
But
don't need one, but this is,
But
it's chairs,
a decision,
yeah,
yeah.
giving direction to
yeah.
community
Yes.
development
A motion to do this, yeah. Move this direction.
I think if there's a consensus of the plan commission that that's what you want, then we can work with that.
Well, not a consensus, there's probably a majority.
What does consensus mean?
I don't know, I don't think
We don't-
more than a majority.
We all
It does mean
relatively
more.
agree.
Yeah,
But-
majority is. It's like few and several, or try.
We all hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
I don't think that ever.
I said consensus because that's my preference, but if we get a mere majority, we'll deal with that.
So I guess I'm asking for to
Yeah.
find out if we have a majority or not.
The point being, we need to get a.
We need to
decision.
move on.
Yeah.
we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Only 2. 3.
How many are there?
Is that,
Did you vote?
I don't care.
Oh,
I mean, I don't think we need a motion.
But it's a.
Heather's
we're
just trying to
find
get a sense for how you feel.
We're doing a straw poll then. Let's do it as a straw poll.
Well, if we only have, so there's 7 of us.
There's 3 so far.
Yeah, you know what, just to get it moving,
Mm-hmm,
I'll say yes.
mm-hmm.
Okay, because, and let's write the code, but I have concerns about restricting. I guess my concern is the small people together collectively, individual people, and how this is gonna actually work.
So you think it's too burdensome?
Yeah.
I mean,
We're
saying we're making
it's
it
hard,
more
it's
restrictive.
hard for me to know. This is like the minor subdivision, when we talked about if you've got your lot, you had to wait 5 more years for the
Right.
next person to be able to do the
Right.
sub. It was like, when do I develop, right? Do I have to actually do this today? I don't want to, but I'm afraid if I don't do it today, I'm gonna be on the back end of this thing. And until I actually see it work through, but in order to put this, then you have, the motion is passed, right?
Yes.
Madam? Okay, you have direction.
Well, but I'm not understanding your concern, because currently, the concern you're raising is the problem, if I understand. Am I missing this? That you have the individual landowner who comes along with the 31st dwelling, and they gotta pay the entire bill for that second access.
Or they don't get to subdivide.
Or they can't, or their right to subdivide is taken away,
But I-
to build, even one unit, even a house, right?
That's right. We just turned one down for that reason.
So you take their right to build on their lot away from them, or they have to pungle up a bunch of money,
And find a road.
$100,000 to put in a road. That's exactly the problem right now, and it seems to me that's what you're pointing at, and I'm not understanding why.
Well, I
Some
explained,
kind
I
of rule like
explained it
this would
because
help.
the person, we own, there's a lot of potential there. Somebody does four houses. And nobody does anything for 5 more years. Okay? then another person does 4 houses.
But this is the current problem.
Well, that's why I'm trying to figure out how this solves the problem. Because this is beautiful if we know there's gonna be 25 parcels.
Well, if you do it by lots, I think was the original point, is if you do it by lots or parcels, you help to solve the problem because they're not built on yet. And so when the road services that many lots that aren't built on yet, people haven't built, you gotta have that secondary access. And that causes the cost of that secondary access,
Right.
it seems to me, to be incurred up front more and distributed more equitably to the parcel owners than that one person who gets hammered right now under the system that exists, if I'm getting the issue. Or maybe I'm missing it. That sounds like the problem.
Well, at least if it's in the code, people can look at it and see, oh, I'm gonna have to pony up on
Yeah.
not only the cost of the road, but I'm gonna have to get an easement from my neighbors before they even start the subdivision process.
Exactly, and before they build any
So
structure.
at least they'd be on notice in a way that they are not today.
That's precisely what I'm driving at.
Or they need
Okay.
to hurry up.
But that
That's a
only
good
works
point.
if you assume that all those parcels are gonna be developed at some point in time.
No, I mean, you're not assuming they're gonna be developed. If you go by parcels or living units,
Well,
the
I'm not
minute,
explaining it well, because you're assuming that you know, like today, take any of those beige
And,
color
yeah,
ones,
right.
okay? You don't know if those are ever gonna be developed.
But I think we should make the assumption though that they are gonna be developed.
right,
Because
Okay,
if,
but how do you, okay, so which ones do you put together are all gonna be together for this determination?
well, all the ones that are served by that
By
particular
that
road.
road, by whatever existing or proposed road we're dealing with.
So the first person develops, the 4-person develops it, and because it's on the same road with all this other property, that first person's gonna have to build a secondary, because it hasn't gotten to 31 yet. The potential is for 31.
So you're saying that this is a 4-lot minor subdivision?
Yeah,
And they're saying, okay, we're proposing a subdivision that's going to create lots that exceed 30
Or exceed 25.
it could.
or
But you don't
25.
know, because they're basically sitting there doing nothing. But they're all on the same road.
But we would count those 25 and say, we don't know what your intent here is, but this is a bona fide parcel. It is eligible for that use.
First person has to do a secondary road then.
We would say that the developer of the subdivision, if they're
It's not a
bump,
subdivision, it's a 4-lot subdivision.
But if you don't count the lot, the existing lot, and you allow this person to develop, to split, to do a 2-lot split, and create the 32nd lot, and the week after council has approved this person comes in for a building permit on the lot that they've owned forever, you gotta tell them no?
No, see, I'm not explaining this well.
okay,
Forget about the 32nd. You have 100 acres undeveloped today. They're all on the same road, all owned by 5
20 acres, different
right,
people,
owned by
let's say.
5 different people.
Okay.
The first person in the list on the lot decides to develop into 4 5s. They're all on the same road. The other 4 do nothing. And potentially they could. So what I'm hearing is the first person, because potentially the other 4 can develop, that would turn it into, if I did the math, maybe I did it wrong, but if the math was the right number of parcels, they would have to do a secondary because the potential for 30 some odd.
I see where you're at.
I don't think
But they're-
so,
but
because
they're-
under that scenario, you don't count the 4 other parcels
If it's a-
That's what I thought
because
Lee was talking about.
no,
they're not divided yet.
no, you just count the
You
parcels.
gotta have 25 divided, you gotta have 25 parcels.
So, but based on that, the 5th person, whatever the number is
If-
gonna
if-
be, will have to have a secondary.
If the other 4 already have 4 each.
Right.
But they can't, but if they only have 20, we're not gonna
I
say,
know,
But yeah, if they're only 20 acre parcels,
then,
But
we're not
then
gonna,
the first, but then that person then doesn't do anything.
we're not gonna assume that they're gonna develop it into 4. Do
I
a
mean,
full
what this
split.
is saying is when you hit 25 parcels or lots,
Right.
not a
Not
20
future.
acre with potential for 4. You see the difference?
I see the difference, I just don't understand the solution, but that's okay.
Well, a minute
Well,
ago, we were talking about the potential. A minute ago, I mean,
But-
that's why you cut it to 25, was because you assume that some, if not all, are gonna put 3 units on there. So what if I'm at the end of that road or non-road that Dave's talking about? If I hurry up and get my house in there now, then somebody in between me and the main road is gonna have to put in that secondary access next to my house, because I got there before they did. So if I hurry up and build, even though I don't really want to, but I want to beat the rush, I should start building duplexes and auxiliary dwelling units on my properties.
That problem exists today. That is regardless if we do
yeah.
nothing here,
We have that problem right now.
that problem exists. And so what this is, again, is it a step to try and facilitate or to at least put people on notice that if they are requesting to do subdivisions and create additional density, that if they are exceeding the threshold, then they are the ones to be responsible for a secondary means of access.
Yeah, which is why I should do it before we get to that threshold, so somebody else will have to do it.
But as a point of fairness, let me just suggest as a point of fairness, what you're trying to do is shift the cost from that last person who comes on to build their house to earlier in the process, to the earlier developers. So the cost that second access can be equitably distributed better. It's not perfect, but it'll be better than the current existing situation. So however you fashion the rule, it seems to me that's the goal, right?
Yeah,
To,
yeah.
to truly get there, I think what you have to do is somebody has 100 and they want to split it into 4. They want to be the first person to split into something. We talked about this at another meeting that we had about easements and road widths and everything else. You almost have to look at the underlying zone. What's the most potential for that lot? And then use that to guide how the 100 gets split up, and do we even require an emergency access at that time for the person that's splitting the 100, because this all can, this can be created from that 100. And when the state legislature adopted driveway standards and they said that we can serve five lots, 5 single-family residents, well, if you take 100 and split it into 520s, and then the first person to split that now has to widen that road to 20 because it goes from a single driveway to an access road. And then it just creates problems and problems and problems. And if you don't get ahead of it and say, okay, what's the worst case scenario for this 100 acres? Looking at the counting, at zoning and so forth and so on. And if you don't let that dictate how it goes, then you're playing catch up from then on. If the density allows 2.5 acres in that zone and you don't figure for that, then you're upside down on everything.
And the problem you have is compounded, because not only an economic problem with the person at the end right now, their ox gets gored. It's a practical problem because by then, all the lots are built on and everything, and now you can't get people to agree as to how you're gonna have the second ingress and egress.
Now, the earlier you approach it, the better.
Right. I see that situation as more of a taking away individual rights than the first situation, is where I'm coming from. I'm with my friend here on that. I think we want to preserve the individual rights, and the more you can equitably distribute the cost and get the access up front, like you're saying, not playing catch up, then that's protecting property rights more than waiting until you just happen to be the last one there.
So you can't build.
Yeah.
So, do you want to move on to number 3? Close us to number 3.
May I ask another question that probably is impertinent? The International Fire Code requirement, does that come from the state or from the county?
The state.
Comes from the
State
state.
adopts the fire code. And then through the adoption process, they make changes or modify it. That's where the driveway width got reduced and some other things for access got reduced. But that 30 number for the best of my knowledge has never been entertained because, you know, when you have large fires that burn up communities, that's kind of like nobody wants to take that on and say, yeah, we'll increase that liability. So, and, you know, every time we have a Mantle Lake or a Paradise or an Oakland Hills or a big fire like that where we have a huge loss of life and structures, then Hawaii, then it's kind of a number nobody wants to mess with.
Okay, so number 3, this one is gonna, I think, benefit from the exhibits that we have or the illustrations that we have that's on, that David has up on the screen now. There is an administration contradiction that staff has with these 2 standards currently. The contradiction exists where there are roads in minor subdivisions and existing private roads that connect to minor subdivisions. So as you see on the left-hand side, the scenario here again is the same impact, both of them being 2-lot minors. What our code says is for the scenario on the left-hand side is that because that is a road, an existing private road, that is within the boundaries of that minor subdivision, the code requires that road to be improved to the associated highway district standards.
Where it's tricky, and they can't see real well, is the pink is the road. A portion of that pink you see is actually outside of the subdivision. That was purposely drawn that way, because that's a real world scenario we've dealt with regularly. Let me just point to it.
I got you.
Oh, thank you. Right there.
So
See?
this portion is outside of the subdivision.
So where Ben's going with this is we have a law today says the road in the subdivision has to meet highway district standards. But we got a piece that's not in the subdivision.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the road is not within the subdivision. So I made a distinction, what is highlighted in pink. The road continues to the south in this example. So the part that is pink would be the part that would have to be improved to the associated highway district standards. That's currently in our code. Now, again, in our code, it says that if an existing private road will connect a minor subdivision to the nearest existing public road, then the road must be brought into compliance with the International Fire Code. So that brings us to a scenario on the right-hand side, where, again, you have a 2-lot minor subdivision. The road is partially within, but partially outside. And so technically, as we have adopted and administered this, is that because it is technically not fully within the subdivision, they don't have the ability to get additional right-of-way or improve that standard to half of a road that meets the highway district standards. This is not a road that is fully within the subdivision and therefore only needs to meet International Fire Code. So, because they have the unfortunate benefit of their subdivision having this road solely contained or completely contained within this proposal, they have to be bringing this road up to the highway district standards. Same road, same
So
impact.
There's a fundamental unfairness
Yes.
built into the current code.
So I think what the idea here is to try and simplify things. And there's 3 solutions that we could potentially be looking at here. One is the A1B, or that's section A1B, which requires for roads in a minor subdivision to be brought up to the associated highway district standards, to essentially eliminate that standard and solely rely on the International Fire Code standards.
Unless
That's another scenario, but that's, the first one is this. So that is one solution, is that essentially we remove A1B that requires improvement to highway district and solely leave it to International Fire Code. Solution number 2 is that we require the existing private road to be improved to the highway district standards only when it is to a highway district standard road. So essentially, it's kind of an incremental improvement of the highway district standards.
So
based
at
on-
least you don't have a situation where there's a highway district road out in the middle of nowhere that doesn't connect to anything.
Yeah,
At least it would connect to another highway district road that's fully built out.
Well, then could it be a public or private district, or a private road meeting highway district standards?
Right.
Doesn't
It could be.
necessarily have to be a public road, it could be a private road, but it meets highway district standards.
Okay.
It's part of a plat.
correct.
In any event, you have a new road and an existing road that meet the same standard. So at least there's some connectivity, it makes some common sense. Because at the moment, we got this situation where you gotta build a highway district road, and it may not, I mean, what it connects to may not be a highway district road, it may be a substandard road.
It's possible.
Yeah. So that's another solution, keep going.
So another solution is that if it's the feeling of the commission that the International Fire Code standards are not adequate to begin with, and we should be looking at a higher standard, but the associated highway district standards is overbuilding what is necessary, then we could be looking at some kind of intermediate standard that is somewhere in between the two. And staff has been coordinating with another group that have been proposing and working on some ideas for some kind of intermediate standard. So that is also something that we can consider.
Question, wouldn't that intermediate standard though, that doesn't necessarily do away with the problem. The problem, if I get have it right, is a portion of the road is on adjacent property. So the person with the minor subdivision, or the entity with the minor subdivision, doesn't have the power or ability to bring the road to highway
Right.
district standards, right?
That can be an issue. If an approval or the improvements to that road require the approval of an adjacent property owner, they could easily just say, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be willing to let you participate in this. I don't want the subdivision to go through to begin with, so I'm not going to allow you to improve this road. And therefore require additional right-of-way width.
That's actually more common than anything else.
What I'm just looking at is, looks like the option 3, you still have that potential problem, that they're not gonna be able to meet the standard that you implement.
It's still something we'd have to work through on how we would be able to improve roads outside of the proposed subdivision.
Can you require, in the second scenario on the right, can you require the adjacent property owner to contribute to bringing the road to highway district standards?
So what actually the highway districts do that very thing is the highway districts, because they recognize that the roads do not meet their standards, they currently require fee in lieu of that improvement of $7,500 per lot. So the highway districts are doing that very.
So they're improving the road?
They're not necessarily approving the road because they don't have the jurisdiction over that per se, but they do have the approach, their jurisdiction of when that road connects to the public road and that approach to it. And so they are saying, because these roads do not comply with our current standards, we're not going to force the individual property owner and developer, because of the 2-lot minor, to make those road improvements, but we are going to require them to put up $7,500 per lot.
We can buy out our obligation with $7,500
Where does the money go?
to the highway district.
to the
Yeah,
highway
but-
district, they,
What
yeah.
do you use it for?
In an account like an impact fee account.
It's not fixing the problem. I mean, if they used it to improve the road to highway district standard, that would make
Well,
some sense.
and they do ultimately. In the same way that impact fees have to be used within a certain time frame and for certain projects, the highway district's hamstrung in the same way. The monies they collect, they have to use for their roads within a certain time frame.
For their roads, not the road.
That's
Right.
correct. It may not be the
Right.
one that is being impacted by this particular subdivision, but within their jurisdiction, yeah.
Yeah.
On option number 3 there, that if IFC standards are not adequate, what does that mean? By whose standards, so to speak? If IFC standards are not adequate, who makes that determination?
Well, that's something that I think I want to put on the table for you guys to consider. If you feel that international fire code standards are inadequate, but the highway district standards are overly burdensome, then maybe there's some middle ground.
I forgot what my real question was. So we're talking about over the entire area of the county. When we're talking about if the fire code is inadequate, we're thinking as a general application over the entire county, not in some special case.
Correct, yeah.
So the width for.
Ben didn't want to presume to think for you. It's your call as to whether you think fire standards are good enough for the county's
Well, I
minor subdivision.
appreciate that, man, because it seems like this commission wants to be thinking for a lot of people in the county.
Yeah. The width for fire code standards is 18,
20.
20?
20 for 5 lots or more,
Okay.
and 12 if it's considered a driveway for 5 or less. So it'd be 6 or more is 20, and then at most highway district standards start at 24.
Okay.
But you get, with highway district standards, you also get curbs and more runoff control and everything else.
So the big difference in expense is not so much in the width, right? It's in the base you got to put in and the
Base,
curbs and
everything else.
sidewalks and
Drainage.
Base and width,
yeah.
yeah, because you have an 8-inch, 4-inch, and then 2 overlays.
Because I thought a fire district road could be a dirt road.
Absolutely.
You can.
So-
The
Yeah.
fire code requires an all-weather driving surface, and
Right.
we consider compacted gravel as an all-weather driving surface.
Right.
So, you know, in my mind, I'm analogizing to, you know, if you have an easement, two parcel, or you have an easement burdened in a parcel and a servient in a parcel, and it's incumbent upon both parcel owners to pay for improvements to the easement. So if you have to bring the easement up to highway district standards or something, the way current easement law is, both parcel owners are obligated to do that. And I'm trying to wonder why you couldn't require this here. And then I'm thinking, well, the person who puts the minor subdivision in, they create the problem, right? Because now you have a road that has to be brought up to highway district standards, and I'm the neighbor, and I'm like, well, now why do I have to pay for that? Because you've now created this problem.
Right.
But, I mean, one way to do it is, if you can, to compel them to contribute like you would to an easement to improve the width of the road rather than charging an impact fee. Or you could require, another way to do it, I'm just thinking out loud, is you could require the person who created the issue by creating the minor subdivision, they have to pay for the cost of bringing the road to highway district standards. And even though it's really not on the, well, I guess it's a private road, maybe it's on the person's property, but you probably could compel the other property owner to allow that to occur.
You may, but again, if, as we hear a lot with our public comment periods, we don't want the subdivision to come through because it's gonna create additional traffic. And so if I know that I have the ability to stop this subdivision by not granting that additional width, then that's gonna give people the power to do so.
What I'm suggesting though is you could compel them to grant the additional width. There's ways you can do that legally as, governmental entity, but that gets you into, it is a mess because now you're taking away people's property rights. And they're gonna say, I don't wanna do that. I agree. That's a problem. That's a real conundrum.
In the dictionary sense of the word.
So
which Conundrum.
solution do we like?
Or do you like any of these?
And on option one, why is it, the way that's written, it says that it does not encourage existing private roads to improve the highway district standards. Why is that something we want? Because if I understand the first one, we would eliminate the 1A, B, whichever one, and it would just be International Fire Code, right? Would be what it would be. That's simply it.
Correct.
And option one to me is, well, now a major subdivision requires highway district? Okay.
Correct.
So this
Yeah.
is only minor subdivisions
Yes.
with, option one would say International Fire Code for all minor subdivisions.
Essentially, yes. That's what option.
And reduce the conflicting stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And option three is actually a higher standard than International Fire Code because it's somewhere in between.
Correct. That's my
Yeah.
understanding.
And number two is,
There may be the potential for it to coincide with the International Fire Code, but there may be instances where it would be greater than.
but why would that, I mean, again, the fire districts can't figure out, don't have the expertise about roads. How would the planning commission know if IFC is adequate enough? I mean, that would be hard to determine. So to answer Sherry's question is, why wouldn't it just be number one?
Well, my own personal opinion, I think that seems reasonable to me, but wanted to provide additional options
No, I
to
understand.
consider. So that's my personal opinion.
Because we just spent about an hour on talking about IFC on number two, so why wouldn't we just say, make it simple? If it's a
Can
major,
I just chime in real quick?
Go ahead.
And I don't want to influence the board at all either. I'd rather, but just to stick with the facts, I have reviewed subdivisions where an existing private road, according to the fire district, did meet International Fire Code, but I would say it was probably the most unsafe road I've ever driven on. Yeah. So it was riddled with potholes, and I think I had shared this before in a previous meeting, but I don't know who determined it to be meeting International Fire Code, but one of the concerns the fire district had is that their vehicles would be damaged and potentially an injured person could be more damaged as they exit the road. So the road met International Fire Code, but it was not safe. And so we actually brought in another one of our findings on the safety issue. So I just want to add that as just additional data.
Well, I'll piggyback on Amy's point. That was a case where the staff wasn't up to giving us an adequate explanation of whether the road met fire district standards or not, because they didn't know, in my view. But they said it did. And once they said it did, it puts us in an excruciatingly awkward position of having to say we're better experts than they are.
I think the assumption many of us probably had was these standards are safe if they're properly maintained and all that. If it's
That's the
IFC,
difference.
the road is safe. If that's wrong,
Well, you just heard Amy tell
Yeah.
you about a case where she drove the road.
but that may have been,
And
it may not, but there's always a case where a standard was approved that didn't really apply. That somebody could have done an IFC approval and it really didn't apply. But if we're concerned that IFC is not safe, then this whole discussion,
But
and that might have been a situation where perhaps that individual, because we had an earlier conversation where we might need confirmation more from an engineer. So maybe that could have been a different scenario. If an engineer had reviewed the road, maybe a different outcome. But also I want to emphasize that existing private roads don't always assume they have a maintenance organization. They could very well be just not maintained at all. Like they could have an easement, but there's no responsibility in maintenance. We run into that a lot too.
Yeah.
Would option 2 be applied retroactively or just going forward basis?
I think it'd probably be, as the application is submitted as a condition on that.
Going
Particular-
forward?
going
So you wouldn't
forward.
go back and require people to?
Correct. Oh, yes.
Right, yeah, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Number 3, I don't think we want to go down that road. I mean, basically, if we did this, and I realize maybe somebody's working on this, but are you talking about the county developing a standard for a road? And I don't think we want to get into that business. We would adopt or use IFC or highway district, but I don't think I don't think the county wants to be developing a road standard. Just my opinion.
Well, yeah, you open up, as a
Right.
friend of mine used to say, a whole bucket of worms. It's, I had this discussion this morning with one of the engineers that's been working with Eric on a separate set of standards that the county would put into the county's code. I've told him I have concerns about that because
Right.
we'd be headbutting potentially with 4 highway districts. I've told this one engineer this morning that I think we need to go to the highway districts individually first and see what and if they're willing to support to try and help us move forward on this. Because I don't want to get betwixt and between 4 highway districts
Right.
and the county commissioners.
Yeah.
The politics of that are a no-win scenario.
Right. I suggest we should consider their input before we go forward with this.
Yes, sir.
Sounds reasonable to me.
So which one are we supporting? Which solution are we supporting? Because they have a problem and they're asking us to support a solution.
If you, if.
Yeah.
Do any of these ring for you?
You want to hear from the highway districts first before we chime in, or do you want us to chime in now?
If you have opinions, go ahead. If, we can certainly run this by the highway districts and come back to you.
I think we should kind of leave 3 off the list for right now. I think we should either talk about supporting 1 or 2. That's my opinion.
I guess when I think of it that way, that's a good point. If we supported 1 initially and want the highway district's input, if they come back and say, oh, no, you can't do that, and here's why and everything, then, because it seems like it's more their decision here. They have the expertise.
I think since our code has changed in 2016, that opened up the potential for subdivisions to be served by existing private roads, I think the highway district from that point has been looking for ways to continue to get back some of the flexibility that we've allowed for property owners. So I think if this is a question that we give to the highway district, then they're going to say, no, we want it to be highway district.
Number 2.
Yeah. Oh, not even that. They'd say, we want the entire thing to be highway district. So that's,
I guess I'm not following you.
so the number 2 is only when it's adjacent.
Oh, I see.
They'd say, no, we want back pre-2016, which would require this to have been improved to the highway standards from the beginning.
Why shouldn't we do that if the highway district feels that's the proper way to go?
Well, that's, I think, a political decision, and it was the board's
In
Board of County Commissioners.
2016, that Board of County Commissioners said, we don't care what the highway districts think.
we're gonna allow for more flexibility.
I mean, I see the problems, particularly out my way, with, roads that don't meet the highway district standards. I mean, they turn into a mess. We have erosion, potholes, all kinds of problems.
Yeah, I mean, so that's, again, a part of the presentation here is that is the highway district standard road, should that be the standard for all subdivisions? The board from 2016 decided for minor subdivisions that no, we believe that International Fire Code should be allowed for minor subdivisions.
Which is a lower standard.
Which is a lower standard.
I guess I disagree with that. I guess my opinion is they should
And-
meet the highway district
And
standard.
that change was the reason why back-to-back minor subdivisions became advantageous. Because major subdivisions require a higher road standard.
Correct.
So back pre-16, it wasn't as great of a difference between a minor and a major. And David has said numerous times, some jurisdictions don't have a difference between minor and major. The application process may be a little different, but, so that's the biggest change and it was driven by the county commissioners.
Point well taken, and that's what
But-
created this serial minor subdivision problem.
Yeah, and again, see, that's why the roads you're talking about a lot of money. And now there's safety, and you could argue all those different things, but the fact is, it all started with, not the developers, a family wants to divide the property up. And they would have to spend $50,000, whatever the number we were quoting at the time, to do highway district standards. And they were trying to find a way to allow people to maximize the use of their land but what happened is, the families, it benefited those individuals, one specifically, what happened is, other people using the code as written did things to their advantage to allow them to divide at a lower cost per unit and make more profit at the expense of having adequate infrastructure to support a large-scale division. And, so I don't know what the appetite of the county commissioners are about going to highway district standards, but that's a big change.
Yeah, but what you're illustrating is one of the central problems with the whole minor subdivision thing, is that the reason for the change of the minor subdivision was to help the small family and all of that. And the reality was it didn't. But it may have helped them a little bit, but what it really did was open the back door for developers to skirt the major subdivision. And in my view, violate the law by creating these serial minor subdivisions through shell corporations.
And the irony of the whole
fundamental
thing,
problem.
the irony is that there was no discussion at that time in 16.
So we need to
But I would argue,
I hate to interrupt, guys, but there's an appointment scheduled in here
Oh,
right now
God, it's-
that we gotta,
So I'm actually for number 2, because it's kind of a compromise. It lets the highway district feel a little more empowered, or whatever the term would be. But that's my straw poll. I'm for 2.
sounds good to me.
I suppose we can put a pin in it for their
Yeah,
today.
let's start there, come back.
Come back.
So when they're
Start at
meeting
that
again?
point. When's your next meeting?
When's the next meeting?
We haven't planned, what's everybody's availability?
That's where I live.
What's your availability for
I'm
next meeting?
available next week. I put it on for every Thursday,
Okay.
but that's just,
What about everybody else? We'd like to stay away from Thanksgiving, so,
yeah,
I'm available next week.
yeah.
And
I'm
the
available
following.
next week.
Lee, are you available
Yeah,
When is this?
next week?
I probably am.
Okay,
For you, Madeline, I would.
so,
let's plan on
Next
next week.
Thursday?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we are adjourned.
Adjourned.
3:38.
All right, thanks
So that's
everyone.
what,
Get out of here.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, you're welcome.